give it a little bit. I always like to give it 10 seconds, check to see if it's coming through the other end yet.
Oh, wait. We're going last name here. How do I edit that?
Oh, it's in the settings. The little cam mic part.
Gotcha.
Looks like we're doing. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. This is my name is Jacob Daniel. You don't need a last name. You're good.
It wasn't going anyway. I couldn't figure it out. I was like, screw it.
Cool. Well, yeah. Again, good evening, everybody. My name is Jacob Daniel. I'm here with Adam Nutter, Rob Coburn, and Matt, no last name. And we are with the PA Mises Caucus, and this is a brand new podcast that we're putting together. We're here to talk about all things liberty, all things related to the Mises Caucus, and especially anything that's going on here in our home state, the Keystone State of Pennsylvania. I'm going to go around and let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. First, but definitely not least, I want to introduce Adam Nutter. Adam, how you doing tonight?
What's up, everybody, and everybody listening, hopefully. What's going on?
Cool. So, yeah, Adam, just tell us a little bit about your background for those who don't know you, how you became a libertarian and associated with the Mises Caucus, and what are the issues that matter most to you in terms of fighting for liberty against the state?
Yeah, so that's obviously a lot to unpack, and I don't want to be a bore, so we'll keep it kind of short. So, again, I guess I was never a Republican. I was never a Democrat. I never really knew what I was, back when I was younger. I was like, I don't know what the fuck I am. I know I'm not these two things, though. I didn't know what libertarianism was. I didn't know anything. And then in 2008, like all of us, this is a fucking dead horse we're beating, right? But like the Ron Paul movement, we saw Ron Paul, like, oh, I'm that. I'm that guy. Whatever that guy is, right? And then I obviously started looking into it more. I was like, oh, I'm a libertarian. Okay. And then so 2008 on, that's, what I always identified as, or, politically anyway. But as far as like where we are now with the Mises Caucus and stuff, yeah. So like I'm a comic. That's what I do full time. I have my own podcast and stuff, and I'm in a world where it's very just kind of leaning one way, very left leaning, and that's not how I perceive life to be, just through one lens, and that's unfortunately a lot of my job, a lot of my peers. So just being a libertarian party and seeing like it not go anywhere, you're like, hey, aren't we supposed to be fighting for liberty? Like they don't stand up for, like, anytime there's a big event in this country that you would think the Libertarian Party would be at the forefront of saying something and being like, hey, we're against the lockdowns. It's like, no, you have them being like, we're actually, this is cool. Like, so it's like you see all this stuff, and even before COVID, right? All this, you never really saw them for like a pro-gun message, any of this stuff. So you're like, well, what is this? And then, yeah, I know Dave Smith obviously is a comic through my comedy background, but like listening to Dave just constantly talk about his view and his message, and then I found out the Mises Caucus through Dave, and then I was like, all right, this is exactly what I got on board for: the actual liberty, the actual caring about ending the Fed, ending the wars, ending the drugs, all that. It's like the stuff that matters, not what you can and can't say, or like the Republicans just, again, Michael Malice's quote, right? Like them progressive driving the speed limit, it's like, that's what they are. And it's like, yeah, let's actually push the issue of liberty, push freedom, actually care about our fellow Americans and get that message out. And that's what I, here for. And that's what all my other podcasts I do is for, and, all that stuff. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know when I first heard Ron Paul, I didn't make that connection, unfortunately. I didn't realize, like, he was a libertarian because he was with the Republican Party, and unfortunately I just had a bunch of people who were shouting loudly at me about how evil Ron Paul was because he wanted to abolish the IRS, which,
yeah.
how evil it is for wanting people to keep their own wealth and the things they earned. Like, God, that's just diabolical.
Evil.
Yeah.
Mad scientist, like some would say.
Right, yeah. Matt, no last name. How are you doing tonight, man? Tell us a little bit about yourself and, how you became a libertarian and join the Mises Caucus or Mises, however you want to. I've heard everybody. I've heard like 5 different pronunciations of that name.
Dude, I've heard like everything of it, but kind of much similar to Adam. I was never a Republican. I was never a Democrat. Honestly, I never really cared much about politics at all. Like I had a lot to say about each side to it. Just never really generally gave a shit to call the faults on both sides of them. I honestly, since I was so young at the time, like 2008, 2012, I was in like middle school. I didn't even know about Ron Paul or anything like that. So I actually got into libertarianism through my girlfriend who I met last summer, who introduced me to it. So I actually jumped in with the Jorgensen-Cohen campaign, and I was really deeply inspired by Spike Cohen. And then I found out people like Shane Hazel and listening to his podcast, and it really pointed me more towards Mises. And then seeing Mises on Facebook versus, say, like the other side of libertarianism, it's like I identified with that much more. So when I started on my county, our current chair now, Jennifer Moore, actually started help me start that, and she actually pointed me in the direction of reaching out to Jeff Douglas and Mike Heiss. So that's actually how I ended up here. And then I got involved, became a state organizer, suggested starting up our own state social media, jumped on board with that, and the rest is history.
The hardest thing to believe about your story is that you met a female libertarian.
I know. He was actually the first. I never heard of it before that.
You have one of the 5 that exist in the whole country or something, I guess.
One of the best ones.
Yeah. No, I got a good one too. They are out there. And you know what? It's my wife is she was a little bit late to the libertarian and getting on board with that, but then when she did, she went like balls deep, man. Like she's a bit more like radical than me. I mean, like, having conversations with people like, well, actually, we should just legalize meth. And I was just like, it might not be the first thing you talk to somebody about, but
hey, if you're not going all the way, you might you might as well.
Hey, if Ron Paul can get a clap for heroin in what was it, South Carolina, man, meth,
right.
that's no big deal.
Right. Then we got Rob, Rob Calburn. How are you doing? Tell us about how you became a libertarian and associated with the Mises Caucus.
Right on. Well, I'm Rob Coburn. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was a product of the Ron Paul movement, but I was a little bit late to the game. Coming out of like high school, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. My first election that I ever voted for president was my senior year, and it was 2004. And my mom was a Republican, so I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go vote for Bush. I had no idea what was going on. Then that was a disaster. Then in 2008, I hadn't even found Ron Paul yet at that time. But my dad was a Democrat, and I was like, well, that Republicans didn't work. I guess I'll try Democrat, and I voted for Obama. And that was even worse. So it wasn't until 2012 campaign when I had started law school. I was watching one of the Republican primary debates with a fellow student that I was going to school with, and Ron Paul came. He said something, and I had commented like, "Yeah, I agree with that." It was about like sound money, and my friend was dumbfounded that I wasn't aware that that inflation is a natural and healthy part of an economy. So I was like, "Well, what am I missing here?" So I started down that path, and I'm still looking for what his justification for that. But that sent me down the Austrian school, and I ended up getting accepted into the Mises Institute's first graduate class, and hadn't really ever been with the Libertarian Party until I found out about the Mises Caucus. I found out the Libertarian Party wasn't really that into Ron Paul. I was like, "What? This is a waste of time." So it wasn't until really November of last year when I saw a post of a friend, and it had the Mises Caucus, watermark on it. I was like, "What the hell is this?" And once I found out what was going on there, man, I went to my next county meeting, jumped in there. I was like, "What can I do? Let's get excited." And they put me on the board that day at my first meeting, and been grinding ever since then.
Awesome. Yeah, my backstory is came out of high school as a Democrat, and 2015 got really involved with like the Bernie Sanders campaign because I liked his message of calling out the corruption in politics. He seemed he was an actual politician with integrity. I mean, even though I was always left leaning growing up, I did kind of have a disdain for politics because like I could kind of had that libertarian gumption in me of like this is all kind of a Ponzi scheme and politicians don't actually care about you. They're just there to get rich and get their donors rich and all that. But I was very much deluded into thinking that like Keynesian economics and regulation of the economy was important because laissez-faire economics made people starve. Grapes of wrath, Dust Bowl. I mean, all these things that the free market had caused throughout history. That's what I was taught in history class growing up. Was that basically the free market killed everybody until FDR came along with the New Deal and ushered in the golden age of the regulatory nanny state. So it was just through a weird series of events, which I would have to take a lot of time to go into, but I just managed to meet the right people who challenged that paradigm. And kind of like push because I was really big into we need universal health care. We know health care is a human right. I kept pushing nobody should have to work 40 hours a week and be starving and struggling to get by. And just had people that were patient with me and sat down and were like, okay, but just question after question. Well, what's the consequence of you saying this? And what's the consequence of if we say this is a universal right, everybody gets it? Well, where does it come from? Let's get down to brass tacks. And slowly got challenged on my economic beliefs and eventually just, found myself doing a deep dive. And I literally went from left to libertarian over like 2 months. And then considered myself a minarchist, and then 6 months later, as the saying goes, gave up the ghost on that, and here I am. And then when I got into, I consider myself an ANCAP, and I was very much an anti-political anarchist because, it kind of felt right to me because I'd always grown up thinking, oh man, politics are bullshit, and then I finally realized, no, politics are really, really bullshit. So, why would anybody get involved? It's just it's a freaking scheme. You can't change the system from the inside. You can't vote your way to freedom. That was my mindset. And but I had friends that were in the Mises Caucus, and they dragged me to a PA convention and talked to Mike Heiss over a few drinks. And about 30 minutes later, I was a bit more open-minded to it. And slowly, over the last 2 years, I've gotten more involved, and now I'm really involved. And I like what the Mises Caucus pushes, which is an actual libertarian political strategy, which isn't, a top-down one, but a bottom-up of decentralization. And I think that's, definitely. I don't think there's one true way to liberty, but I think you gotta need a multi-tiered approach, so to speak. And you do need, I think, people that are pushing counter economics and agorism and all that, and you need people who are out there educating people on free market Austrian economics and all that. But you do have to do some work, I think, in getting your hands dirty, rolling your sleeves up, and just going toe to toe with the beast, so to speak. And so the Mises Caucus does the best work in that, and and yeah, that's why we're all here. I think, as we've seen that, is that the Mises Caucus is like Dave said at the event 2 weeks ago. It's the force in the Libertarian Party, and nobody can deny that. People can make up a bunch of lies about us and say a lot of things about the Mises Caucus, but nobody can deny that the numbers that we're bringing, the financial ability of the caucus to raise money and to push candidates and to push a message and to inspire people to join. A lot of people. I mean, I think almost every person you talk to in the Mises Caucus has the same story where they were like, I didn't want to. They were libertarian, but not in the LP. And isn't that kind of weird? You have a party named after this philosophy that all these people espouse, but they're not in the party. So I mean. What do you guys think of that? I mean, why do you think for the longest time, people haven't been in the Libertarian Party. Like, what would be like the major things that the party you think was failing on, and that the Mises Caucus you think is kind of like helping to bring positive change?
Yeah, I'll be honest, because people go, oh, you're the boot guy. You were the boot guy on the head.
That's exactly
we
what I was
fucking
gonna
do that
say.
shit, and we listen to that asshole like he's like who the hell he's a fucking hack. Like the fact that he's still talked about by us is a joke. We should drop that dude's name out of our mouth and let him fucking fade into obscurity the way he should go. An obscure loser. That's what he is. And yeah. That's kind of my, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just
I mean, I appreciate some good satire, you know what I mean? But the level at which, some people in the Libertarian Party like deify, people like that, I think is against the whole concept of
we don't get taken seriously.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
satire
hard,
should
too.
be satire, and
Right.
politics should be politics. Like
When you run for president
Yeah.
every year.
But like it's hard, like when you got Vermin Supreme, but then they also like they want to keep us out, but and say like over like we don't want Republicans in or something like that. But then like what about Vermin Supreme? He literally ran independent, Democrat, Republican, everything. But yeah, here he is, and that is like our biggest like forefront. I think that's one of our biggest problems. And another problem I've seen that I think Mises has done really well at bringing in people in, especially like with Cohen's messaging, was we brought in a lot of ANCAPs that didn't want to be part of the party, because when it comes to like if you are more anarchist leaning, some people are just they're so libertarian they don't want nothing to do with politics at all. They don't even care if there's a libertarian party for it.
Well, Jacob, to answer the question you asked, I've been thinking about this a lot, and from what I've been able to figure out, it seems like the divide from where the Murray Rothbard strain of libertarianism really split off from the party was in the early '90s when he started developing the right wing populist arguments and the paleo strategy arguments, which there are wonderfully meritorious things about that argument. Some of it is quite flawed, but it seems that is when this Austrian thing separated from the party, and they really kind of shunned the products of Mises after that, and then the party seems to have gone just continuously left wing, as did society. I mean, you got to figure that was right after the 80s when being a Republican was cool if you were a young kid, but then we headed into the 90s and the sway of public opinion was heading towards the left. And I think the party rode that wave, and that's where this, the pragmatic view really came from. And they've separated themselves, for that long from the Rothbard and the Mises, ideas of anarcho-capitalism. And we've gone so far left culturally, as what's acceptable opinion, that to now try and bring this thing that I don't even think is right wing. I don't think it's really on the spectrum. I don't think anarchism is on the spectrum. So to try and bring it back, and with the moods of public opinion right now, I think it's really hard, and they just label it right wing, and that's been the fight ever since.
Yeah, no, to me, the Mises Caucus isn't a right-wing caucus or movement. I think that, and the problem is, I mean, I have kind of a disdain for even just like this whole left-right dichotomy, because to me it's just bullshit. Like,
agreed.
What do you mean by left versus right? Those terms have meant different things. Like every decade, it kind of what left and what right is changes. I mean, if you want to go back to like the origins of those terms and what they meant, like traditionally speaking, like they came from like the French Parliament, and the right wing were in favor of the monarchy, and the left wing were against the monarchy. So, I mean, like in a lot of ways, the libertarian tradition is more left wing, and actually, some of the foundations of libertarian philosophy can be found from, some of the Enlightenment thinkers, of course, but then also some of the first anarchists came out of, from French philosophers who were opposing the monarchy. So, it's like, what do you mean by left and right? Because there's just so many different ways of defining it. Some people go like there's left and right economics, and there's left and right social views, and I'm like, I don't know. The Mises Caucus has a plank saying we don't give a shit what your lifestyle is, we don't give a shit what your social social preferences are. We define libertarianism just basically by like the non-aggression principle and property rights. I mean, and to me, that's not left.
Well, that's
or
it right there, man. It's the property rights thing is where this whole thing came from. Because really, defending property rights and free markets was the Republican thing. That was the idea. That fiscal conservatism. Not that the Republican Party is even any semblance of that anymore. But who else is really promoting free markets the way that the Mises Caucus does? I mean, that was Mises. Entire thing. So I think that's where this right wing Republican label thing comes from. But the Republicans aren't free market capitalists. They're not private property. The protectors of private property. So
No, we saw that during COVID, right? When this is one of my biggest criticisms on the right is how they just fucking the whole the cop thing with them. They just blindly follow, but it's like, the state, they were also like taking your stores, and who are they sending? The cops.
You see the sticker of like come and take my guns, but then they have the blue line flag right.
It's like, who's gonna take them? Stupid.
Honestly, I don't even understand how they haven't realized that by now yet. And the same thing, they always use the argument, well, cops kill more white people than black people. I'm like, how do you not see that as a problem then?
Right.
You're fine with that?
Right, It's like, well, they kill more white people than black people. It's like, cool. So we're not going to address the fact that cops are just killing a bunch of Americans. We're not going to address the blatant issue right there.
And see, that was the problem with the Black Lives Matter movement, was that it brought race into the conversation unnecessarily, in my opinion.
Of course it did, yeah.
Because the issue is police brutality. The issue is the war on drugs. The issue is qualified immunity. I mean, these are real issues that shouldn't be divisive. But when you wrap all those up in a label of Black Lives Matter, you're just predictably going to get people who are just reactionary to that.
Of course.
And B, it just presents the wrong focal point.
Right.
And so
the
left misses the point, and the problem is the right is so unprincipled and so ineffective in everything they do that all they do is just complain and bitch about people kneeling during the national anthem. It's just because that's the I'm not gonna watch my football game anymore because there's that football player who kneeled during the national anthem. It's like, dude, come on,
who gives a fuck?
I do criminal defense work, and let me start by saying I don't know anybody who has a lower opinion of the police than I do. But to be in all fairness, the race issue and it's not really at the police level. It's more it's in the court systems. I mean, there is a crazy disparity in the rate at which blacks and whites get convicted. There's a huge disparity there, and that's a real actual institutional problem. But at the police level, man, they just indiscriminately infringe upon whoever is in front of them, and it's not really the race issue there. To me, the Black Lives Matter movement seemed like this organization of people took advantage of a great public sentiment that, hey, police brutality is not okay, and they rode that way for their own benefit. But
look at the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd thing. To me, Chauvin's a piece of shit, and even if people want to argue that the trial wasn't completely fair and maybe it should have been this sentence versus this sentence, and I'm not a lawyer, you are, Rob, so sometimes that legalese is over my head, and I'm always a very state by state, so I don't really know, but I just I don't feel super bad about cop who helped to kill someone being put in jail. That's just not something I'm losing sleep over. But you can't convince
a lot
me.
More.
Even if we're going to say Derek Chauvin is an evil POS for what he did, I can't find any evidence that the way he acted was that this guy's black. I'm gonna put my knee on his neck for 10 minutes.
Right.
Like there was no racial thing going through his head. There's
the
no
issue-
evidence of that. I mean, there could have been, but there's no evidence.
We all, but again, we just talked about it, right? How I've seen,
Excessiveness is
month,
excessive.
like a month ago, there was an Arizona shooting where that guy, it was pretty brutal, just shot that cop in the back of the head on the dash cam, and then they chased him down, they killed him, which whatever, that is what it is, right? But like, no one gave a fuck. No one gave a fuck. No one talked about it. Like I did because it was a wild video as is, but like it's still a crazy incident, right? But no one was like, wow, they went too hard on that guy. Like it's just, my point is like it was a white on white thing, right? It is what it is. It just doesn't draw the media, man. We all know that. Like that's the crux of it. We're not stupid. We all know that's the real reason, and that's what drives numbers, and that's what drives people to fucking talk. That doesn't, and the other stuff does.
Sells, man. You know
Right.
what it is.
Right, we all know.
I think that this like common rejection of this identity politics kind of like framing that like the mainstream media and our institutions push for like telling the news and the narrative of what's going on in our country and the world abroad. Like this rejection is, I think, one of the things that unites the people that are attracted to the Mises Caucus. But people who are like more on that like kind of left, like SJW woke bandwagon, confuse like anybody who doesn't agree with that as like being right wing or alt right or like, you know, in those camps. And like I don't think that it makes you right wing to reject viewing things as just these you know, like reducing everything down to racial
it's not
groups
that
struggling
blatant
against
like
each other.
black and white. It's not at all. And then like I think that's one of the biggest things that steers people away is that we refuse so hard to play identity politics because it's like, okay, if you're gonna say this affects one minority group versus say the general whole, like what I said earlier to Adam Nutter about, well, police kill more whites than they do blacks. Like it's not any race problem, and you can't signal it out that way. It's overall like this is a societal problem, and if it affects one, it's going to affect the other. Like you just cannot signal anything out like that.
Well,
And that's like, it creates a huge divide amongst people. It's like it creates stupid controversy.
Well, there are certain issues where something is so clearly wrong on a racial level, like the disparity between convictions between blacks and whites. It's insane. It's actually astronomical if you checked out that number.
That I would definitely say.
But so there is something going on there that isn't quite right, and I've been trying to figure that one out. But
well, the system certainly has
on it.
disparities, but like it's just this complex web, and it's not as simple. Like and so like there's always debate over like systemic racism or institutional racism, and it's just like I don't know how you define that term if you bring it up. Like, do disparities exist on a systemic level? Absolutely. Is it useful to call that racism? I don't know, because when you call it racism, you're almost implying intent. And like now you can look back to like some of the shit that like say Lyndon Johnson did in the 60s, and like I think things like the welfare state and certain, and then also things like Joe Biden and other ones did in like in the 80s and 90s with our criminal justice system might have had racial intent in it. So you could say maybe like the architects of a lot of our legal system might have had racial intent when they designed the system. So maybe it makes sense to call it institutional racism. But I think that the problem is mostly there are incentive structures and kind of like things have developed in a certain way circumstantially that have caused these disparities.
Yes,
and I don't think that it's like the majority of the country is a bunch of white racists who are oppressing minorities. And
no, in fact, there's no benefit in it. So why would you? Yeah, I agree with you. But I never said racism. I said there was a racial disparity, and there is something going wrong there. I think it was at the same time that we started recognizing black people as full people in this country, we also chained them down with the welfare system, and it crippled them, and they haven't been able to, hey, come on in. Yeah, you can be people, but here, why don't you just take this money in the meantime? Oh, look, now generations of people have been on welfare, and it's really strapped these communities down to the welfare system at the same time that we were recognize them as a full human being. I think that may be where the court issue comes from, because poverty, and crime go hand in hand. But I'm sure there's a full analysis that needs to be done there somewhere. But
Well, speaking
I'm
speaking of the,
thinking.
but I don't think that I agree with you. I don't think that there is active racist policies being put in place, because there is no benefit. There is no benefit to it.
Part of me, like, it also kind of feels like with the whole drug war, like with that created a huge disparity. Like, it wasn't supposed to be a racism thing, but then like it ended up being that way because what did the CIA do? They went and like they flooded all these poverty-ridden neighborhoods and like helped back up gangs and cartels and gave them all these drugs, and they're like, okay, now we're gonna throw you in jail for that.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It's not even a conspiracy. Like that detective got killed over that shit. Like the LAPD guy, I can't think of his fucking name. But like the CIA, like they got caught like selling like crack into the LA system.
Yeah,
Like undercover CIA guys. And then like that, yeah, this is like true. It's even like this is all like out in the open now, like 20, 30 years later. But like it's wild how like this is the government's just funding, just feeding the system to fucking put people in prison. It's what they're doing.
oh yeah, yep, and they're all getting freaking rich off of it.
they need some type of narrative, so they can keep collecting tax dollars.
Well, and like, and this is where like, and like the term cultural Marxism gets thrown around, and on
It's
one
a good
hand, on one hand, that term can bother me because like it almost seems like historically kind of like ridiculous, but I think it's a good way to kind of describe like how the left works, which is like it's kind of playing a Marxist game of like what was initially like the way to implement your policies and the preferred government is to get the populace sort of like riled up based on class warfare, but what like cultural Marxism, like that term describes, is like replacing the class warfare for like this like tribalism that's based in identity politics and it's not even just on race. I mean, you see they've added sexuality into it, they've added gender into it. I mean, I feel like every 6 months there's a new acronym I have to learn the meaning of. Like now that like it used to be LGBT and it's LGBTQ, now it's GSM is the new acronym they're using. It's gender sexual minorities.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
It's
if
like
you
when they
think
added
about it,
maps in there.
Right.
If-
Yeah.
No, that's no. Like I said this before, they're pedophiles. Like,
They are. Wood chipper
You're-
all of them.
100%. Like if I remember one time I saw on Twitter like there was like a map like meetup on like a public street, and all I kept thinking was like if I had my car, I would have been like I'm going to jail for this. Just take that right through that fucking meeting, dude. Like if everybody doesn't know, MAP stands for minor attracted person.
Oh my god.
It's ridiculous. Oh
Well,
my
so-
god. This is another thing that I thought shot us in the foot, like with the Jorgensen Cohen campaign, is like I saw like it blowing up, but there was a bunch of maps there flying a maps the MAPS flag at one of their events in I think South Carolina.
We should kill them. I don't understand. I don't understand. Like that's like the one NAP. I mean, it's not really breaking the NAP. You're protecting kids, right? But like, I don't give a fuck. Like, if I could get away with that, I would. I hate that so much. It's like the worst crime you could do. It's like it just hurt an innocent child. It's like and then Vice pushes that. You see that Vice article? They put out like.
They
Is
push the
pedophilia-
worst.
Yeah, is pedophilia really like a disease or whatever the fuck it was? I was like, yeah, no, it is. It's a crime. like, no, they're awful. What are you talking about?
It's disgusting. And these people, they never get better. They just get worse, and they get better at hiding it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I'll never be on board with that.
Yeah, I don't think libertarianism is the same as what's the term, like being libertine in your your social views and stuff. And I think the problem is a lot of libertarians that have like been in the party for a long time, they are very libertine, very like like they have this different worldview or this beliefs about like kind of like being anti. Like they view it as being anti-Christian, colonialism, like all these terms they throw out, and they're like, oh, all these structures were put on us to oppress us, and they view like libertarianism as like their primary focus isn't on economics or on war or on like what the state does. It's more like, oh, it's about like maximizing our freedoms in a social sense to identify ourselves however we feel free to, and I think there's a real danger in that, and I don't think that's what libertarianism is about. It's not about redefine, like they're conflating, and like that's where guys like Thaddeus Russell can bother me, because it's like he tries to give postmodernism a good rap, and I'm just like, I don't know, like, because he's like, well, it's just radical individualism, and I was like, I don't know.
Really,
I mean,
if you think about it, man, what you're talking about is really, the counterculture movement of the '60s, the free love, free expression. That's really what you're talking about. It's that's not so much a philosophy based on the principles of individual liberty. It's I can do whatever I want whenever I want, no matter what. That's I don't really think that that's what the principles of liberty teach, and especially not if you're in of the Austrian mind. That's not what the markets result in if you just let them work properly.
Hey, let me ask you guys a question, because this is something that I've encountered a few times while arguing with idiots on Twitter. They'd be like, "Oh, they'll find out I'm libertarian." They'll be like, "Oh, you libertarian? Oh, ask a libertarian about the age of consent laws. You fucking creeps." And I'm like, "Oh, what is that? I never heard of this argument against it. I just keep hearing that argument against this." And they go, and I've said before, I go, "I don't know what you're saying. Could you clarify?" And they go, "No, whatever, I go, "I don't." I've never heard a libertarian be like, there should be no age of consent law. I've never heard of this.
I had to look this up too, because I'm tired of seeing it, and like the whole also libertarians hate AOC because of age of consent. But it's like apparently back in like 2016 or 2017, dude's not even part of the party anymore and got outed. Someone did try to have a debate and changing in like the age of consent and like lowering it to like 16 or 15 or something, and I was like, it's disgusting. It did happen. Someone actually tried to debate that.
One creep just tried, and that we got labeled for one creep's fucking.
I think there was
debate.
two. It was that dude the most recently, and then some chick way long ago. I forget both their names. They're irrelevant. They don't even matter.
That's what I'm saying. That's okay. Well, now I know. All right, that's good to know.
They want to yell at us, but okay. You elected sniffing Joe Biden, but okay.
Yeah.
At least we settled the debate and kicked them out. You guys are voting for him.
If they're trying to argue that the libertarian philosophy is somehow flawed because a stateless society somehow then implies because there's no state, then we don't have age of consent. The concept of age of consent. I think that's a ridiculous argument to make, because clearly I don't think anybody would argue that like there's a point at which a child does not have the capacity, and at some point, of
course,
they mature. So I think that's a flawed argument to try and say, well, libertarian, there's with no state, then you could just, there'd be no age of consent law. I think that's a ridiculous argument.
Rob, that's the same argument for religion, by the way. People go, listen, if we didn't have religion, we wouldn't have laws. I went, nah. I'm pretty sure at one point people would be like, hey man, should we stop murdering each other in the streets? I think that's probably a good idea. We should probably stop that. It's 1982. Eventually, like, someone would have figured out, like, to stop murdering and stealing each other's shit, like, without religion. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just a cop out. That's okay, but yeah, it's nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, I think this is keying in on the common dichotomy of like, is libertarianism a thick philosophy or a thin philosophy? And to me, libertarianism is a thin philosophy. It's not something that gives you all the answers to morality, to how to live a good life, how to live a meaningful life. It's more of a philosophy that it kind of explains how social cooperation can happen, how free markets work, like just the foundation of society in kind of like the what I would call like a polycentric legal sense. But it's
human
not
action.
Yeah, it's human action.
I think it was Lou Rockwell who said, once you understand the principles of libertarianism and Austrian economics and the strain of Murray Rothbard, you can never look back. And I think that's true, because once you really understand, truly understand the non-aggression principle, and once you really understand, free markets along the lines of the Austrian school, you can't look at anything else. There's nothing more compassionate. There's nothing better for humanity and for the lowest members of society. There's nothing better for it. That's the example that we have in history of what it did when we allowed it to work, and every other all of the rest of history was working against this idea of free markets and a deregulated society.
Yep. I mean, we got some stuff going on here in PA that we should probably talk about. That putting philosophy into action. I mean, one of the biggest things that's going around in our state is that I've heard a lot of people talking about is the minimum wage, and that seems to be something that's being pushed more and more. And Wolf made a post, about it. I just saw yesterday or today about how. He's making a major push for the minimum wage to be raised to $15 an hour. And
over time.
Yeah, over time. I mean, it's just funny to me how the debate around the debate around minimum wage is kind of like it is. I'm trying to think of the right word here. Like, if you start there, you can almost work backwards to show the flaws of trying to centrally plan an economy.
Well said.
It's just the idea that you think you can just raise the wage and that you're not going to think about the consequences that come after that. And the only argument that the Social Democrats give for why it won't cause issues is it recirculates the wealth. And they think that's what an economy is. It's just money flowing in and out of people's hands, and that's why they nobody thinks it's a big deal when we just keep printing more and more money, because to them the economy is just it's playing Monopoly, except instead of having rules, it's just we just keep printing more Monopoly money and just keep swoofing it around the board, and that's no, that's nonsensical. You can't just keep printing more money and
that's why we need taxes, they say.
Yeah,
that's actually what Keynes. That is what Keynes said. He said, He said you can get away with this because you will, but through fiat, you make people pay taxes, and they have to pay taxes with your currency, and that is his whole. That's basically modern monetary policy right there, which is money has value because you pay taxes with it.
Right. It's crazy. There's also another thing too with the $15 minimum wage hike, or any hike is a minimum wage, and this obviously is not for every person who's in a minimum wage job. So fucking chill out, everybody. But what I'm about to say, but also you have a lot of dumb kids who work minimum wage jobs, and they don't deserve $15 an hour.
Not at all.
Because they can't produce it.
That's exact. And this, man, I hate to do shit I do in my act on podcast, but I have a bit where I talk about this because it's true. I fucking have the Dunkin' Donuts app, right? And I called ahead, put it ahead of time. I just got a blueberry muffin and a coffee, and I walk in, and then the guy was like, "Hey man, are you Adam?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, but what's up?" Yeah, and he's like, "Hey, we didn't have any more muffins, so I just gave you a chocolate donut." I was like, those two things aren't close to the same. So I was like, yeah. And you don't deserve $15. That was a dumb kid move. And he was a kid. Yeah. He was a teenager. He was a dumb teen. And it's but that's a small example, obviously, and a unconsequential real example. But that goes into bigger things, right? To the bigger world, to the bigger other markets. And you're going to, and then again, what does that breed for skilled workers?
Yeah. I wish. Oh, go ahead, man.
All I was going to say was I think all it's going to do is it's going to push more people out of the market. It's going to have more people unemployed. High schoolers, maybe they won't be able to get a job, or they'll have more dumb high schoolers working and less adults, so they're on unemployment. And then, what is even the data? If you look back to the first minimum wage, how much has unemployment been spiking since then?
Well, who does minimum wage laws hurt the most? It hurts the unskilled and uneducated members of the inner city schools
inexperienced.
that can't generate enough income to even get a job. So I wish that I could approach everybody on the minimum wage law as an introduction to libertarianism, because it is so provably,
yes,
it's the best way to prove the concepts of all of this, and you can trace it all the way back to the origins. I mean, Walter Williams it did all of the work for us. I mean, you trace it back to the origins of minimum wage. You look at, and people need to read more Bastiat, because the seen and the unseen, the long-term effects is really where these things play out. But it hurts the worst members of society because it keeps them out of the job market. We've put them into schools which failed them. They have no experience or discernible skills, and they can't even get started. So now you have hiked the wage up to an amount where they can never get hired. So it hurts the very people who it is supposed to be helping the most.
Now it starts to hurt small businesses too, and it shuts them out and just backs up big corporations.
Yeah,
and like that's exactly what I was going to say, which is like how it just makes me so angry. I'm trying not to just like cuss like nonstop, but like and part of this is like I'm angry because I used to believe this dumb shit. But like the left goes the left goes on so much about the evil of corporations, right? And I'm just like, okay, well then shouldn't you be pro small business and not be like passing like laws and regulations that destroy small businesses and just consolidate more and more power for these corporations to push all their competitors out of the market? Like,
yeah, well, that makes sense.
It's just political theater. Like, people try to say AOC is notorious for that, and you don't need big businesses. But if you look at her campaign records, her three biggest donors were Amazon, Google, and I think University of California.
I think it was AOC actually, and like I think people hushed her because I think she accidentally said the quiet part out loud and like said something in a tweet like a few months ago that was like, well, small businesses get over romanticized and like they don't pay their workers well and they don't always provide benefits and everyone was just like, no, we don't
shut the fuck up. Thomas Sowell said it. I'm gonna fuck it up because I have brain damage, but I'm still gonna paraphrase what Thomas Sowell said. But Thomas Sowell, his whole point was like, he was like, when I was a kid and there was like no minimum wage laws really, like I was able to get a job and work my way up the ladder and get a better job. He's like, and then the minimum wage laws hit, and then like black young kids unemployment skyrocket as opposed to when he was a black kid when he was young, when there was actually a lot more young black men had jobs in America. And then the minimum wage laws hit, and then it pushed a lot of them out.
And the dollar had much more value then too.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Well, like, and the other thing is like landlords aren't stupid. Like when they see that minimum wage goes up, or when people get stimulus money, they see that people get stimulus packages. If you pass something like UBI, people getting extra $1,000 a month. Like you think the landlords are like, ooh, people got all this free money. I'm gonna leave the rent right where it's at.
Nope.
No, like they're gonna be
they're gonna up it.
Yeah, they're gonna up it. And then people go, well, that's why we need price controls. It's like, okay. And this is why I've always said Keynesian economics is just slow pushing socialism.
Well, the real
like it is literally just like we want essentially a planned economy, but we're going to pretend that we don't. And just slowly nudge you into complete socialism because it's just it's like, oh, well, if you do this, it causes prices to go up. Well, we need price controls. Well, if we have price controls, we'll have scarcity. It's like, well, seed's the means of production.
Well, the real evil of the Keynesian thing, man, is that it gave the state the perfect out after the Great Depression. It's like, oh, this is all we need to do is print more money. But I want to mention. You know what? I lost it.
I was gonna say, do we have people commenting in the chat over there? Like that we
you
know
what?
I remember what it was.
Like, is there any good shit we could like riff off, like bring up or like talk about? Like anybody said anything?
I have not been looking. We got 3 comments here.
Dude, my mouse is all the way the fuck over there. So
John Walden said, if you can't afford a living wage, that's the dumbest argument anyone can make if they've never owned a business. Businesses should do their best to pay their employees well, but not be forced by government. The market will decide.
See, this is what I hate, man. We recognize this concept that there is a point where people are unskilled and they need to become skilled. We recognize that unpaid internships serve a huge purpose. You can pay somebody nothing. You can pay a student who's going to school, taking on hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can hire them and pay them nothing under the guises that they're gaining experience and invaluable knowledge and experience that they can't get anywhere else. We recognize that concept in unpaid internships, but then that just goes away when you're talking about somebody who didn't have the luxury of going to college and is just trying to get a job. So this person, they can't get the unpaid internship because they're not in school. They can't get the job because they can't generate enough money of what you're required to be paid. That's ridiculous.
So Kate has a good question here. How do we convince people that taxes aren't just part of life?
When
do you want to say that?
It's wild when you approach people and you're like, do you like paying a 30 or whatever to the government? And they're like, well, no. And I'm like, okay, so then you should listen to this message or this message and they go, well, the roads or the police or the fire department, and you're like, come on, man, and you had to go into that whole argument, or not only argument, that whole discussion of.
So here's my answer.
Like, you want the roads, like, it's even cheaper. You're like, the average person works for the government 5 months of the year, 6 months for themselves, 7.
Dude, Bastiat laid it out for us in the 1850s or whenever it was. He wrote the law, man, that legal plunder is what taxing is, and it's just when the state takes on the becomes the institution of the plunderers. It has all been lost. Man, if you ever read the law, you need to get there. And Bastiat said it better than I've ever heard it put.
What book? I never read it.
To answer Kate's question, I would say you can't be wishy-washy. Like, think about, like, if somebody said in 1855, like, slavery is just part of life, man. Yeah. And then we said, okay, but, like, what if we just, like, whipped slaves, half of what we did now? And what if we paid them, what if we, like, let them one day a week go out and do some stuff, have some freedom? Like, that would not have ever pushed slavery to be. I mean, like, you could argue slavery still exists in parts of the world, and I get that. Well, but like, people didn't like push for slavery to become denormalized in society by being wishy-washy about it. They called it out for the evil blight that it was, and we have to do that with taxation. We have to be bold. Yes. And this is going back to, like, we need a modern day Spooner. Yeah, and this is like why I love the Mises Caucus and why. To me, the Libertarian Party needs a bit of a shakeup. It needs to not be afraid to be libertarian. Like, you're not going to wake people up by making, like, small little, like, posts talking about, like, oh, if we cut taxes by 15%, it would raise productivity. But, like, no. The argument is taxation is fucking evil. It is taking people's wealth by gunpoint, and it's and sometimes worse, it's forcing people to work. Like, you're making taxation is basically modern day slavery.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And on top of that, they're taking guns and pointing them at you for not paying your taxes, right? With the tax money that you already paid, so they're literally using your money against you.
Yeah.
So, guys, I just want
to. One more thing about the tax thing, Rob. I'm sorry. I start telling this people when people start pushing back on the tax thing. I start being like, okay, cool. So I know for a fact. So do you, the person I'm talking to, ever. I go, your tax dollars go to bombs to kill innocent children overseas. And if you're even a second or an ounce okay with that, then I don't know, man. We have a real disconnect here in this conversation. Because I'm not okay with any of that. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure you're not either. So, the fact that I have to tell people that, I'm like, your money goes to bomb women and children overseas. This doesn't go to the roads. Which, by the way, are the roads awesome now?
I don't know about you guys, but my roads are a 12 out of 10.
So, dude, I fucking drive through 95 to get to the studio. I live in Bucks County, but the studio's in Philly that I'm in right now. It's like driving through fucking Fallujah during their attack. It's like the roads in 95. I'm like,
well, that's where
no. It's like fucking terrible.
Well, Fallujah's where our highway fund went. Well, I just want to bring up real fast. We're coming up on an hour, and we have basically rambled along about the whole ANCAP thing. Basically, we touched upon everything here, but I just want to say, what we're gonna do here, man. We're trying to do with this thing, what the Mises Caucus is doing, and we want to address each of these things and do it in a more structured manner, I think. But yeah, I think we probably want to end it up at an hour here. But what do you guys want to say about like the caucus, man, and where we're going? And
I'll tell you, I'm fucking hyped where we're going. All I see is positive things. I'm like, and like for everybody, not just the Mises Caucus, like the whole libertarian, like it's moving forward. Like let's push that message, push the issue, unite everybody together, and actually get shit done, and not just dick around, for lack of a better word.
I'm super excited for it. After the bash in Pittsburgh,
it
really hyped me up for everything, and I'm really excited about everything we have going on with this podcast starting. What is it, Jacob? Next week we have David Freit coming on.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone that's listening, tune in next Thursday at 9. We're going to have David Freit from Fight for Liberty. We're going to talk some more. So, this was our first podcast, so we kind of setting the stage. We do want to talk a lot about stuff going on here in PA, both related to the party and just the current events and stuff. David was at the PA convention, Libertarian Convention 2 weeks ago, and the at least the first night of the Mises Bash, and he's one of the big forefronts of the libertarian unity movement. So yeah, we're gonna have Dave on next week and have a good conversation. Ask for his perspective on some of the stuff going on here in PA that he got to kind of be a witness to, at least pertaining to the party.
And then Wednesday, June 9th, we have our new chair coming on. Jen Moore will be joining us at 9 o'clock Wednesday, June 9th.
Yeah, so stay tuned. We got a lot of stuff coming out. I mean, to me, I'm excited.
I think we plan on being a bit more focused about things. You know what I mean? Not the rambling of what we did here, but
Well, this is the first episode. This is a get to know us episode.
This is to get to know what we're about. We're all Mises Caucus people here, but at the end of the day, our identity is that we're libertarians. We believe in non-aggression, and we want to put the message of liberty out there in the mainstream, in people's faces. What was it that Tom Woods said? Enough putting people to sleep. It's time to wake them the hell up. And that's what I'm fired up to do with the Mises Caucus. But we're inviting Jen Moore on, like Matt said, in a couple weeks, and I'm willing to work with anybody. They don't have to be Mises Caucus. They can be a Prague. They can be
absolutely,
a radical,
man.
on that point, go ahead, Rob.
On that point, I want to say the Mises Caucus has been called a lot of things, but if you're actually in it and participating in it, the most admirable trait among many of which the caucus has is its ability to take on and discuss every issue of any kind with anyone, and not bring it to ad hominem attacks or mudslinging. That's what I would like to see here. What we do, bring on let's talk about everything, man. Tell us what you guys want to hear. Let's get into it and let's find out what we're all about. But I gotta say, man, the Mises Caucus, I've never seen a group of people so passionately, civilly have civil discourse with each other.
Oh yeah, there's a wide variety of people in the Mises Caucus. We are not a monolithic group by any stretch of the imagination. And like Rob said, if there's stuff, we want to be focused on PA as much as we can, because we're the PA Mises Caucus. So if you guys, if there's stuff going on in your county or in the state, and you want us to talk about it, just shoot us a message or make a post on our comment on our posts and stuff. Follow us, share our content. We want to talk about liberty everywhere, both abroad, the country, but then even here at home, because that's what the Mises Caucus is about. It's about decentralization. So
coalition building.
And coalition building. So that's what this show is going to be about. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm excited, and as a comic, I'm a self-plugging whore. So before we get out of here, real quick, guys, follow me at Adam Nutter on Twitter, please. And then my new podcast, my other podcast dropped called The Porcupine. My first guest was Larry Sharp. My second episode is dropping at midnight tonight, with featuring Brian Nichols from the Brian Nichols Show. So please hop on over to my YouTube channel, Adam Nutter, and just subscribe to the audio everywhere you can. And if you guys are in Allentown this Friday, I'll be at the Allentown Farmers Market doing comedy. Boom. That's it.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's only a half hour for me. What time, bro?
Oh, shit. I think it's an early show. I think it's 6 or 7.
I'll shoot down.
Come down, Allentown Farmers Market. And then for all you Jersey folk, Turnersville, New Jersey at the Laughing Fox, the Tuesday before we talk to Jen Moore. So whatever that day is, like June 6th, 4th, 5th, whatever the hell it is.
8th.
Whatever. So the 7th. So June 7th, there'll be a Laughing Fox, Turnersville, New Jersey. That's it. Now I'm done.
Yeah. So while we're plugging stuff, the only thing I want to plug is just I have another podcast, Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy. That podcast has a different focus. As a Christian who's also a libertarian and anarchist, I like to try to connect my faith to the subject of liberty. Try to encourage. I try to do two things. I try to encourage my Christian brothers and sisters to embrace the liberty message, become part of the movement, and then two, even if you're not Christian, I think that stories and narratives and things from history can inspire us and teach us lessons. So I like to unpack the stuff in the Bible and unpack the wisdom of it and the lessons and show how the stories aren't teaching statism. They're teaching anarchism. They're teaching liberty, individualism. So you can check that out. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, all that. Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy. That's the only thing I want to plug. You guys got anything you want to say before we close it out?
I have nothing, but I plan on launching a podcast soon. So if I do, I'll plug you next time.
You're not a real libertarian unless you have at least 3 podcasts now, okay? Like that's the new rule in 2021.
Well,
I
am just
5?
starting out, so this is my first.
I think this is my 5th one. It's too many. I do too many things. It's like I do a comedy one, I do a sports one, I do a nonsense one. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing anymore. I do 2 libertarian ones.
Man, now I don't even want to say it. I got another one coming out too, but we'll get to that.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody thanks everybody who has been watching and joining us. Stay tuned for more stuff. Like I said, next Thursday at 9, we're gonna have David fight, so that's gonna be a good one. Come check it out. Until then, remember to go out there, take human action, and fight for liberty.
I'll take it.
That's it.
All right, gentlemen.